Okay, welcome to the main section of today's podcast, where I'm very pleased to bring to Music Fishbowl someone who I've admired for many years. That's Dan Patlansky. Hello, Dan.
Hey Dan, powerful name you got there, man.
Exactly. Likewise. It's two Dans on the podcast today. It's not often I get somebody on with the same name as me, so it's quite a new realm, let's say. Dan, very much looking forward to speaking to you, and thank you so much for coming on to the podcast as well. I've been a fan. Weirdly, I've actually never seen you live, which astounds me considering how connected to the blues scene I am here in the UK. But at the times when my friends who I go to gigs with have seen you live, and they've seen you about 4 or 5 times over the last 8, 9 years, it was when I was either at university or I was only working part-time, so I didn't have the money to splurge on gigs at that time. So now I've been working full-time for 5, 6 years. I can afford to go, and it's just never married up. So very much looking forward to that, and I'm sure the new tour that we're going to talk about will give me an opportunity to. So very much looking forward to that. But I have been a fan for all these years because people have obviously spoken about you and streaming exists, etc. So I've been able to listen to your music and follow your journey. And talking of your music, first question I ask everybody, just to help people gauge where you are roughly as a musician, if possible, is what genre would you best say describes your music?
Man, that's firstly, thank you for having me. And
That's okay, no
that's
problem.
I've never actually been asked that question before, believe it or not, Dan. I've never been asked that question, and it's a tough one to answer. I would say its DNA and its foundation is the blues, without a doubt.
Mm,
But I think in many ways I do stretch a little bit outside of the blues and kind of draw inspiration from other genres I enjoy. And obviously, not all genres marry well together, but
mm,
there are certain ones that I like to experiment with and kind of bring in other elements from, if it's jazz, funk,
yeah,
soul, more the southern rock thing, and I love that. And for me, that just kind of keeps it interesting. But I would, without a doubt, say, even though that exists in my music, that blues is the core ingredient always, always, always.
yeah. No, 100%. And you're right though. It's those sort of the southern states, the music that traditionally comes from them over in the US. It all works together, doesn't it? It kind of blends really nicely.
Yeah, it does. It really, really does. And it's like, I suppose they all stem from the same place, which is the blues, right? That old school
Yeah,
traditional Delta blues thing.
yeah,
And, it's all stem from that. So, you know, it should technically work. And it does. Obviously, we've,
yeah.
through decades of people doing this,
Mm,
we've realized that. But, sometimes it's great to like kind of marry genres that just aren't supposed to be married together. And
yeah.
more often than not, it doesn't work out, but you would always come out of that experience with just little nuggets of gold, right? Like where you're like, wow, that little kind of chord change there, or singing this melody over this
Mm.
thing that doesn't really exist in that Southern American kind of sound actually makes this whole thing quite interesting.
Yeah, no, definitely. I've always said one thing I've always said is that the earliest country music is just the 12 bar blues strummed, basically. It's all it is.
Pretty much, yeah.
It's pretty much is that, isn't it?
You can't argue with that, man. They all had that birthplace, and it's so fundamental to music we listen to today for the most
Yeah.
part, that when you kind of go back to it, it doesn't matter how fancy you get and how sidetracked you get. It's always just this supreme pleasure on the ears when, well, at least for me it is, when I go back to a good old
Yeah.
standard 12 bar blues that's got no bells and whistles, no clever twists and turns, and you're just like,
Yeah.
damn, this is why it was such an important genre and why so much stem from it.
100%. It just works. That's also its simplicity works. It's three chords and the truth is all you need to write a song, and that's pretty
Yeah.
much where it comes from. That's where that saying comes from. Um, I like to go chronologically when I speak to artists, so
Yeah.
we'll start off early. Again, this is kind of the second question I usually ask every artist, and it's what music was playing in your household when you were growing up? What was the first musical sounds you were hearing around you?
So I would say, blessed with my parents' music
Mm.
collection, and not everyone can say that. I know a lot of
Yeah.
people out there are like, wow, the stuff my parents listen to is cringeworthy, but my parents really had this incredible, vinyl collection and CD collection in those days. And it was this, I suppose, this gumbo of from my mother's side, it was like more of the classic rock thing. So
Yeah.
like Zeppelin and Deep Purple and Hendrix and that kind of thing. And then from my dad's side was, also those bands, but a lot more on the blues side of things, like all the traditional blues guys. It was Stevie Ray Vaughan, Clapton, the older guys like Albert King and B.B. King, Albert
Yeah.
Collins. And then there was a bunch of like quite traditional jazz played in the house, which I'm just a massive fan of still to this day, like Oscar Peterson and Charlie Parker and guys like that. And then, there was even like In Excess was thrown into the mix every now and then, and like, those 80s kind of pop rock kind of groups. But it really was a fantastic musical upbringing. And when I was, a young teenager, I just couldn't bring myself to admit that I enjoyed the music that my parents were listening to. So I listened to what any young tween or teen in the 90s listened to, right? And there was some good stuff there too, Nirvana and Soundgarden, all that kind of stuff, which I still love today.
Yeah.
But it was only really when I got to my late teens where, I just couldn't escape it anymore. I was just like, man, this blues thing, it's bit me, hard. And, like whatever, I'm just going with it because I really felt like it was, I suppose, the music that I knew the best because I listened to it constantly, So it was a good combination of roots music. That's probably the best way to put it.
Yeah. No, I always find it interesting because this happened to myself as a songwriter too. I always find it interesting when artists, they start off listening to, obviously you hear what's played for you basically, then they find their own sort of interests and sounds that they're into, and then they go back to what they were being played originally as when they were younger, and that's kind of usually that ends up being what sticks, isn't it?
Well, I mean, that's what you've just described there was exactly what happened on my last album I released called Moving On. It was a complete 180 back to, my roots and what I love the most in music, and went back to that traditional thing and loved it, man. I loved every second of making that album just because I felt it was just such an honest, like, representation. It was like, that is honestly who I am.
Yeah, no, 100%. And it's sometimes you can go backwards, and people say, some people try and say, like, you want to reinvent the wheel all the time. You don't have to express yourself. And people aren't always drawn to artists doing, new things, developing their sound. Sometimes we are drawn to artists going back to their past, and we're seeing it now with Paul McCartney's new record and the excitement coming out with that. Is people are interested in getting to know the person behind the music a lot more than actually what they can create with the music, aren't they? Sometimes.
Yeah. So I always almost equated to, like, not that I know anything about the fashion industry at all, but as a kid, I always used to find it ludicrous when you watch those runway models and they've got like the most ridiculous outfits in the world, and you're like, whoever is ever going to wear that anywhere? But then, someone explained it to me. It was like, well, that's the fashion world's version of like out there experimental jazz, right?
Exactly.
You know what I mean? It's not necessarily about familiarity. It's about pushing the boundaries of music. And I think that's very important, and you can draw from that. But at the end of the day, all music really is a vessel to express yourself as the songwriter, as the guitar player, as the performer. And we've all got different shaped vessels that suit our where we express ourselves on a far more natural and, I suppose, easy kind of way to do it. And for me, that's always been the blues. And I think that was the feeling I had on that last album. It was so familiar to me. But it was just so easy to get that feeling across. If I was playing the guitar, if I was singing, we were arranging the music, producing, whatever the case is. It was just like one of the easiest albums I've ever made, because it just was, just get in there, do what you do, and it'll work out at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly. It's just what's natural, isn't it?
Yeah, completely.
Yeah. I need to ask, you mentioned there about playing guitar, obviously. When did you first start playing guitar? How did you get into that? Was it even the first instrument you started playing, for example? Can you tell us the story of becoming a musician, so to speak, as in the early days and it, burgeoning inside?
Yeah. So, I mean, my first real instrument wasn't really an instrument. It was a tennis racket, right? That was this old, like 80s style tennis racket that was kind of in the corner of the living room. And I used to kind of air guitar when I was much younger to Jimi Hendrix and all that kind of stuff. And I think it was around my 10th birthday. In those days, I was listening to Guns N' Roses and AC/DC and that kind of stuff. And my parents agreed to buy me a guitar for my 10th birthday, but I was incredibly disappointed because I knew nothing about guitars, and they bought me a nylon string acoustic. And I don't know why, but in the 80s and the 90s, it was like frowned upon to, if you had to start guitar, you had to start on like a classical guitar, with the nylon strings. I don't know why. That makes absolutely zero sense to me today. But it was just like the time, and it was like, well, that's where you start. And
that was ongoing until I was a child. When I picked up guitar, it was you start there because the strings are harsher.
Yeah, exactly. And but the thing was, no one, not at the music shop, no one explained to me. It's like, well, okay, this is the music you're listening to. Now you can go learn those chords, and you can go learn the song, and you can go try play it. It's not going to sound like Angus Young's guitar, or you know what I mean? Because, but I didn't understand this, and I went for a few guitar lessons, with the guy down the road on like a Thursday afternoon.
Yeah,
and he's like, "What are you into?" He showed me some basic chords, no problems. He's like, "Let's start learning some songs that you want to learn." He showed them to me. What he showed me was absolutely perfect, but it never ever sounded like the song. So as a 10-year-old, I swiftly lost interest in the guitar, and it ended up being this thing where I'd pick it up on a Thursday afternoon, go to my guitar lesson, play a bit, and then put it in the corner of my bedroom, and only touch it again the following Thursday to go to a guitar lesson, just because I lost that interest. And then I didn't play for a year, and then when I got to high school, I was probably 13 years old or something like that. At that point, I discovered Pink Floyd and fell in love with David Gilmour's guitar playing. And then I was a little bit more savvy on why it didn't work out. And then I bought myself like a cheap Strat copy and a tiny little practice amp. And all of a sudden I was like, wow, that's way closer to what I wanted to hear. And, I started transcribing Shine On You Crazy Diamond, the solo for that. And, this was before tabs were around. So, and my ears weren't so good in those days. So it took months just to kind of get a few phrases down, but it was great. And ever since then, that's when I kind of consider really starting to play the guitar, because I only knew a few chords before, but that's really when the bug kind of hit in a big way. And also my schoolwork just went down the drain. Everything went down the drain except for this guitar playing thing. And obviously I gave my parents gray hairs, and but it was supportive, and it's been this passion and love and obsession ever since, I suppose, I don't know, 1995, somewhere around there.
Well, I guess then you have to transition into playing live and moving into the music industry from there. What was the journey there for you?
So, I mean, that's a great question, because we used to have a proper 90s garage band. We had no bass player. or no singer. It was me. I had a mate that played also electric guitar, and we had a drummer, and we just messed around and we played like 12-bar blues, and you can imagine what that sounded like. I mean, we weren't particularly great on our instruments, but there was the lack of any low end in the entire mix, and no vocals, right? And we didn't have the chops just to carry it on the guitar. But anyway, our first public performance was a school battle of the bands, and it was kind of awkward being up there and very scary. It was probably the most nervous I've ever been in my entire life. But we ended up winning this battle of the bands. I can't imagine I can't remember the other bands, but I can't imagine they were that fantastic if we won. But it was this little like nudge in the right direction, this nudge of confidence. And, that was my first live experience. And then, we found a bass player. In fact, the other guitar player, he started playing bass guitar, and I tried my hand at singing, and that sounded like a cat being skinned alive, at the beginning, like we all sound when we start. And, so then we started doing like kind of free shows, at restaurants, like little Sunday afternoon things on outdoor restaurants, just to kind of get some miles under the fingers. Yeah, and then we started getting a proper set together. And in those days here in South Africa, it was grueling. It was always didn't matter where you played. It was 4 45-minute sets. Right? So it's a long evening, and I mean, to be honest with you, I couldn't even imagine listening to my favorite artist for 4 hours. You know what I mean? 90 minutes is a great kind of time, and then you're like, great. Got the flavor, enjoyed the show. Now it's time to go home, right? But I found that playing for 4 hours every night, it really built, I suppose, character. It builds your musical chops up, because you got no choice. You got to think of different ways to play a 12-bar blues, so you don't bore this poor audience for 4 hours. And it was a great thing, man. And we started getting these like little residency every Tuesday at this club, every Wednesday at this one, and then up to the weekends. And this was when I was in late high school. So it was tough to try and battle, to balance the, trying to, be good with studies and kind of pass your year, and also be going to bed at like 2 a.m. on a weeknight. And, it was tough, but it was great, man. It was absolutely fantastic. And it just kind of just grew from there. And I think I was fortunate in South Africa at the time, because there wasn't too many artists in the 90s doing blues, right? There was the odd one, but not in the city really where I was living. So there was this entire audience of my parents' age that grew up listening to the blues and had no real place to watch live blues regularly. And, I kind of instantly gained a following, because I was one of the only guys doing it, right? Not the only guy, but one of the only guys doing it. So it was quite easy to build a following. And then, you get better. The more you get better, the more you perform, the more confident you get, the better your skills become. You start judging an audience better. You start pacing yourself on the guitar a little bit better, pacing your voice a little bit better. And it was just an incredible learning experience.
So, I mean, I was just going to ask you about something you were just speaking about there, about, what the music scene would be like in South Africa. But I guess you kind of answered that already, because I know the scene in the UK very well. I know it in the US a bit, and I know a bit in Europe, because I know things like Rough Records, and I know, Blues Caravan, etc. I know about them and how they work. But I have no knowledge of South Africa myself in terms of the music scene. So is there quite a thriving scene? As you say, there weren't many guys in the 90s doing the blues, but is there quite a thriving music scene, lots of venues to play, etc., in South Africa?
So there was, never at the standard of the UK, never at the standard of Germany or Netherlands or Europe or the States, but there was, especially in the 90s, obviously not the biggest blues scene, but there was a massive kind of alternative rock scene here. When I say massive, I'm using that with a pinch of salt. I'm not comparing it with the rest of the world, but there was a great scene, a lot of venues, a lot of clubs, and a lot of support for the live music. But sadly, in 2026, that's not the case anymore.
Yeah.
I think everything goes in waves,
Mm.
of thriving and then kind of almost dead. And sadly, at the moment, we're not in a great place. And I think, due to COVID, a lot of places just
Yeah.
couldn't stick around. And I find it, and I don't just find this in South Africa, I find it anywhere in the world. It's a tough time to sell tickets to people, right? It's like
Yeah.
people are hanging on to their money, and the last thing they want to spend it on is entertainment. They kind of get a little bit
Yeah.
more serious about their money, which I completely get. But with all those factors in, kind of together, it's quite tough here in South Africa at the moment. There's
Yeah.
venues are few and far between. I'm fortunate that I've got a great following. I mean, my following is fantastic and very loyal fans, but
Yeah.
it's sometimes trying to find just a place to perform that's not an arena that takes 85,000
Yeah.
people. Yeah, we've got a bunch of
Yeah.
those. It's like, but yeah, that's
Mm.
kind of off the cards. It's just to find the right venue size. And when my experience of coming to the UK and all these years and touring through Europe is, I find there is a scene in the sense that there are venues from tiny grassroots where you
Mm.
kind of playing to 40, 50 people, and there are stepping stones.
Yeah.
There's not this giant jump. Oh, you played for 40 people, you sold out. Great. Well, now you
Mm.
need to sell 400 tickets for the
Yeah.
next. And that's what South Africa's always kind of been like, which is
Yeah.
tough. There's all these different size venues. You can slowly build your way up. And then, if you kind of fall short in one year, you move back one and you get back to the one you were before. And I think that is why the UK has a great music industry and a thriving music industry. That's why the States does, and that's why Europe does.
Yeah. Yeah. No, 100% agree with you. And yeah, I guess, with the rise of things like the loss in monoculture and things like that as well is another huge aspect, I guess, because people are listening to such a much more varied array of music, whether it's just themselves or people as a collective are as well. Is that,
Yeah,
ticket sales are getting spread amongst so many different places instead of going directly to individuals, like even people who are massive fans on the UK country scene, for example. They're also going to watch Harry Styles, and it's all getting spread around a lot more
yeah,
because people's listening habits is not as people aren't as into a scene as much. I don't think, but I mean that's my
yeah.
personal opinion. Maybe I'm wrong on
No,
that.
I think you're dead right, Dan. Dead right. I couldn't have put it better myself.
Yeah,
It's spread paper thin at the moment, and
yeah,
yeah, you're right. It's almost the lack of being part of a particular scene. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Like, I'm in the blues scene, and that's what I go watch. Like, whoever comes through town, if they play blues, I'm there, right? And I
yeah,
want to hear everyone and make
yes,
my own mind up. Do I like this artist, or do I prefer another artist? But that's what a scene's all about. And I'm hoping, that things will change. Everything goes through, as I say, waves, and hopefully at some point we'll get back to that world.
yes. Hopefully, definitely agree. It would be great to not to have to see social media posts about gigs being cancelled because of lack of advance sales, even though they may well have sold close to a sellout on the night.
Yeah,
Because some areas, for some reason, they do sell better in person and things like that, just depending on where you are, even in the country, that can change. So it would be nice to be able to not have to rely on pre-sale tickets. But yeah, I hope so as well. I want to talk to you though about recording music as well, because I think it's late 90s you started actually releasing records. So can you tell me how that all came about and how you got into actually recording in studio and putting records out and things?
yeah. So I mean, late '90s, I was still a teenager, and we got there's this like new recording studio with this American guy kind of opened up down the road. And yeah, he had quite a CV. He had worked on, yeah, I don't know in what capacity he worked on these albums, but he worked on these big like John Denver albums in the
Mm,
States, all the stuff. And he had a real kind of like world-class studio. And we went in. It was like I suppose for most musicians that those first in studio recording sessions are utterly terrifying and utterly humbling at the same time. You're like,
mm,
oh, is that what I sound like? You know what I
yeah,
mean? Yeah, it's scary, and then also playing to nobody. and
Yeah.
playing in a room that is dead as a doornail, and you've got no room response. You know, your amplifier is not kind of bouncing off anything and giving you that nice, warm, fuzzy feeling that we all used to, and what I'm used to hearing on the records I'd listened to my whole life. So, you know, it was a big shock, but we did the album. It's it's an album I cannot listen to. There's no way. Like, I mean, it's a tough listen for me, and I imagine it's a tough listen for most people. You know, due to a few things, I don't think we were ready to be in a studio at that point.
Yeah.
I think it was way too early to be in a studio. And also, I think as good as the engineer and producer was, he had absolutely no idea on the blues, right? So
Yeah.
we had the strangest drum sounds, we had the
Mm.
strangest guitar tones dialed in,
Yeah.
strangest vocal kind of effects, and it was like it just didn't make sense, right? And then so that was the first one, and I must be honest, Dan, it left a bit of a sour taste in my mouth. I was like, well, I don't know if I
really?
like this recording thing. Like, it's like hard work, and it's not what I was hoping for at the end of the day. But, you know, the more you do it, the better you get, the more you grow as a musician, and the more confidence you have to say, no, I don't want it that way. I want it this way because this is the type of record we're making.
Yeah.
And I wasn't able to do that for many albums. You know, then I got signed to EMI Records back in the day, and I released, because they own Blue Note Records, and I released this album on Blue Note, just the one album. And also it was a similar thing, beautiful studio, but I felt that it was just a little bit, I don't know, watered down, the whole thing. You know what I mean? Excuse me. It wasn't at all what I was hoping for, you know, at all. But, you know, the album did well for me on the scene, and that's really where I started touring the country, not just playing in my hometown, like really touring the country, because the label got, like, you know, TV adverts going and, you know, all that kind of stuff, and I got the name out there. And then only really after that did I really start taking a little bit more control of the way the album sounded, right? So I wasn't necessarily producing albums on my own, but I was picking people that I knew could get me closer to that sound in my head and what I wanted to sound like. So that album was an album called Real that was released in 2006. And I feel that was like the first time, you know, you never chuffed with an album when you're done, because it's like, it's listening to yourself. It's like looking at yourself in a mirror, right? And it takes years when you've forgotten about the album, then you can go listen to it and say, yeah, well, it wasn't too bad. But, you know, besides that self criticism, you know, it was the first time I was like, yeah, now we're getting close to the sounds I want to come across, and the way my songs need to be arranged and performed and all that stuff. And, you know, all those albums were all recorded live. So they're not the only things I think that were kind of multi-tracked afterwards was like a vocal thing, but otherwise all the instrumentation was like the live thing. And then, you know, like many albums after that, that's when we started doing certain songs live, depending on the song. And then obviously multi-tracking other songs, once again, depending on the song. And I found that to be a cool balance. And it's the balance we use to this very day now. You know, like on the last album, you know, the more traditional slow blues, traditional blues stuff was all tracked live. Not the vocals. We had you know, whatever vocal track down, but then we redid the vocals. But otherwise it was live, you know, because that's just a great way of, when you nail it, you're not going to do it better multi-tracking it. But then other songs just, you know, it just made sense to kind of multi-track them and really think about the parts and really get the parts absolutely kind of spot on for the song.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because I was listening to, you know, quite a few of your tracks in the build up to this, just some of the ones that are coming up sort of in your most popular tracks on Spotify, just to refamiliarize myself with them after some of your records. You know, obviously I hadn't necessarily listened to since, you know, probably a couple of years ago, maybe some of them. So I thought I'd better refamiliarize with myself with some of the older stuff as well as the new stuff, which I've obviously listened to since. But yeah, the slow blues ones, you put it into words there. I couldn't I couldn't think of it myself, why it sounded so raw and had so much sort gusto to it, I guess is the word. And yeah, it's live. That makes sense. That really
It's
makes sense.
dead live. Yeah. In fact,
Yeah.
the most when I say the most successful track, it's not like I'm a pop artist like my number one hit, it's
Yeah.
certainly not. The track that got me the most traction on like YouTube, and the track that I get requested the most is a song called Big Things Going Down.
Yeah.
And that was
I'd made sure I jotted that down in my notes because that's over 2 million streams, which is mad.
yeah. I mean, it's crazy, and that was when we put it onto our platform. It was on some other guy's platform, and that's like sitting on 6 million at the moment on his
Really?
platform.
Wow.
And it's so weird because it's the most uncommercial song ever. It's a slow minor blues. It's dead slow.
Yeah.
But because it was recorded live and it was the right moment, the right time, we managed to capture whatever it is. It just seemed to connect with certain people, and yeah, it just shows you don't have to write a pop song to have that impact on people. It doesn't have to have all those commercial cookie cutter kind of formulas and methods, even though those certainly work. Obviously, it's evident, but it's also just about if you can somehow connect to the listener, however that is, and that's a little bit hit and miss. We all know that.
Yeah.
But when you get it right, it's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. Talking of live, you are going on tour, and before I ask about that, I have to. It would be if I didn't ask about this. People who listen, who know your music and know me, would go, "What are you playing at?" Because you have. I mean, you've opened for my favorite artist of all time, and that's Bruce Springsteen. So I have to ask. I don't know how much you can say, but what was it like opening for Bruce? What's he like? Just spill the goss, basically.
I mean, that was, that was like one of those incredible milestone moments. And you know what? It's scary. It felt like yesterday, and it was 12 years ago. It was like 2014 or something. I did it, but that was incredible. It was by far the biggest audience I've ever played for, and probably, if I'm honest with myself, the biggest audience I ever will play for. Right? It was 85,000 people, a packed out kind of arena.
Yeah.
And I didn't get to meet Bruce before the show. So you're like, oh, you obviously, you kind of brimming with nerves the whole time.
Yeah.
So it was, no one's there to watch you. First time Bruce Springsteen's ever been in South Africa. All these turbo fans coming out.
Yeah.
And now he doesn't normally have a support act.
I have to say that you're in a rare group because there's not many Bruce supports. So
yeah. It's crazy. So we arrived at the stadium in probably late morning. We managed to sound check. It sounded great, no problems. And then we went back to our kind of green room, or I think it was the referee room, or whatever, wherever they popped us for the evening. And then I heard like acoustic Bruce Springsteen playing, and it was incredible because people had been waiting outside the stadium for hours to try and get right up close front. So people started kind of streaming into the stadium, and there was probably about 2,000 people in the stadium only. It was like mid-afternoon, and he went out and he played on an acoustic guitar. He played for 45 minutes on his own. He just warmed them up, and I was like, what the hell? I was like, I couldn't believe it. So anyway, I didn't get to meet him, and Tom Morello was playing guitar for him on that tour.
Yeah,
also.
He was. Yeah.
So I was like, oh man, it'd be so great to meet those guys. So anyway, the time came, we jumped on stage. The first song was nerve-wracking, but we got thankfully a very good reaction from the audience. And then your nerves kind of settle a little bit, and you're like, you know what, just play it. It's like any other show. And then as I thought that, and as my nerves settled, I kind of glanced over to the right-hand side of the stage, and in the wings was Bruce Springsteen standing there with Tom Morello watching the set. And then, obviously there's diamonds in the underpants all of a sudden again. And it's intense,
Yeah.
But it was great. And, the amazing thing is he's about to perform for 3.5 hours, however long he performed for. And he's not backstage getting his head right. He's watching us. And I was like that's crazy, man. Like, who does that?
I know.
And I got to meet him very, very briefly when I jumped off the stage. And I must say, what a humble, kind human being he was. He thanked us for being there. And I was like, are you kidding me? Trust me.
Amazing, isn't it?
It's our absolute pleasure being here. I sadly didn't get to meet Tom Morello because he obviously went back to warm up. But I met Bruce and chatted to Bruce for maybe 3 minutes at tops, and then he had to kind of run off and get ready for the show. But it was all around just an incredible experience, man. His show was cracking good. It was unreal. You know, it was amazing watching a band and artist perform for 3.5 hours.
Yeah.
And 85,000 people know every single song and every single lyric to every song. And you're like, and I kept on saying to my band, I was like, how many hits does this guy have? Like, I mean, I'm not, it's like, you know, there's like no B-side song for that dude. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's crazy, you know?
Yeah. I mean, they say when you go to, I mean, I've been lucky enough to go twice, and they say when you do go to a Bruce Springsteen concert, you are at the church, you're in the church of Bruce Springsteen, and that's what it is, and you're his choir, and that's just kind of how it rolls. Yeah, thank you for sharing that, because as I say, if I didn't ask it, I would have had questions asked to me if I didn't. So yeah, glad I did. Let's talk the tour then. So I have had it cleared. This is going out after the announcement of the tour, so you can say as much as you like. Yeah, can you tell us about the tour, why it's happening, and where it's happening, please?
Right. So let's start with where it's happening in the UK, and I'll tell you all the dates in a minute. But the whole purpose of this tour is, you know, I've released studio albums. I think I'm on album 11 or 12. I've lost track, and you know, it's great. I love doing studio albums, but one of the, I suppose, the biggest requests we've had from fans and stuff is just to release a live album. And I've been very worried to release a live album, because every time I've spent the money and got all the recording gear into that one show we're going to record, as soon as we start, I know we're recording, and it tends to not be the greatest show we ever have. It seems to be a bit tight, a little bit contrived, because at the back of my head, I'm like, better be good. This is the live recording, and it never is. So the difference is we're recording an entire tour here in South Africa, every single show, and then the pressure's off, and we should get a cracking live album. So that's the purpose of the UK tours. We're going to be launching the live album there, and you know, kind of pushing that. And so the tour starts mid November of this year, and we're playing all over the place. We're playing Southampton, Wolverhampton. I don't know how you pronounce this, if it's Trowsbridge or Trowsbridge. It's somewhere south of Bristol.
You're getting me now, and I live here.
I think it's south of Bristol, like that kind of area.
It is. I went to university quite nearby. I never went there, clearly. But you know, there's a lot of good venues around there.
We're in London, we're in Cardiff, we're in Sheffield, we're in Newcastle, we're in Manchester. So it's great, man. I cannot wait to get back to the UK. I love touring the UK. I've tried to do it at least once a year, every year. My last 2025's UK tour, I was a support for an incredible band called Bywater Call from Canada.
Great band, aren't they?
Yeah, they were great, but you know, I came out and I did my solo Loop Station show as the support, because it just kind of makes more sense, and that was a lot of fun. But it's going to be great to get back with the band again, get back to the UK with the band, and tour this live album. So I'm so chuffed to be coming back.
Yes, I'm looking forward to you coming back. And when I was secretly told that you were going to be going on tour, I got a bit excited, purely because I'm hoping the dates line up. I've got a pretty clear enough schedule that there's a higher chance that they should line up for me, and I should be able to get there. So hopefully, yes, especially because it's been a little while since my mates I go to gigs with have managed to see you as well, so they'll definitely be well up for it too. So I'm very much looking forward to this tour. Well, thank you, Dan, for coming onto the podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure. I will put all details about you in the description below, especially those tour dates. I'm going to put links to your website so people can find all of them. But can you tell people anyway where they can find yourself and your music online?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously the website, danpatlansky.com, if you can spell Patlansky, but you'll figure that out.
So it's spelled as it sounds, to be fair, but with a Y at the end.
With the Y, not with the I. I think that's the biggest mistake. But I mean, I've been called strange things like with that. So well done on getting my name right, Dan.
No problem.
I knew I could trust a Dan, you know.
Exactly the case.
So yeah, then on I'm on Instagram, it's at Dan Patlansky. On Facebook, it's at Dan Patlansky Music. And yeah, I'm on all the streaming platforms that you can think of. And yeah, so I suppose that's my online presence.
Yes, well, I will, as I say, put links and everything all in the description below for people, whether you're on YouTube with this or you are on a streaming service, they will all be there. Very easy for you to find. Dan, as I say, I want to say a huge thank you to you for coming on to the podcast today. I really do appreciate it. As I say, I've been a fan for a number of years, and your music, every time you release a new record, it's always there, straight on to rotation. Get it on and give it a listen. So thank you so much for coming on, and we'll wrap up quickly after I click end recording. But yes, thank you to everyone for listening, and thank you, Dan.
Hey, thank you, Dan, and it's been my absolute pleasure, and thank you for the kind words, man.
No, not a problem at all.